Prologue. Woodrow Wilson Nichols died in the year 2025, on a usual day, in the usual way, at the rather unusual age of 105. A century and a nickel. The young VA hospital long-term care liaison assigned to dispatch his worldly possessions to survivors, which in Woodrow Wilson Nichols' case was an ancient military footlocker and no survivors at all, stood in his vacant room. Determined to keep on schedule, she checked the time. Her job made her feel like some gatekeeper of things left behind, especially with centenarians gone long before their hearts stopped beating. They were the only ones with footlockers anymore. And old footlockers with nowhere to go were the worst, their contents full of mortal meaning departed with the departed, as if she could actually see the past vanish into thin air. So she took a deep breath and opened the old trunk, expecting to find the usual musty uniforms and faded photographs. Instead, she found a giraffe. The footlocker was full of ruled writing pads, dozens of them, stacked in bundles bound with twine. Perched on top with a yellow newspaper article was the giraffe, a tiny antique porcelain souvenir from the San Diego Zoo. Despite herself, she smiled wistfully and picked it up. As a child, she'd seen a whole group of the tall, gentle giants at the zoo before they become so horribly rare. Gently setting down the giraffe, she picked up the first batch of pads to move them aside when the top pad's large old man scrawl caught her eye. She eased onto the edge of the bed and read it closer. Few true friends have I known, and two were giraffes, one that didn't kick me dead and one that saved my worthless orphan life, and you're worthy, precious one. They're both long gone. And soon I'll be gone, which will be no great loss to be sure. But the man on the TV just said that soon there'll be no more giraffes in the world at all, gone with the tigers and the elephants and the old man's sky-blanketing pigeons. Even as I punched the screen to shut him up, I knew it could be true. Somehow, though, I know there is still you. And there is still this story that's yours as good as mine. If it goes extinct, too, with my old bag of bones, that'd be a crying shame, my shame. Because if ever I could claim to have seen the face of God, it was in the colossal faces of those giraffes. And if ever I should be leaving something behind, it's this story for them and for you. So, here and now, before it's too late, I am writing it all down on the chance a good soul reads these words and helps them find their way to you. With that, the VA liaison untied the first batch and, forgetting all about her schedule, began to read. I'm older than dirt. And when you're older than dirt, you can get lost in time, in memory, even in space. I'm inside my tiny four-wall room with the feeling that I've been gone. I'm not even sure how long I've been sitting here. All night, I think, since stirring from my foggy mind to find myself surrounded by other old farts staring at a fancy TV. I remember the man on the screen talking about the last giraffes on Earth, and rushing over in my wheelchair to punch him. I remember being pushed back here quick and a nurse bandaging my bleeding knuckles. Then I remember an orderly making me swallow a calm-down pill I didn't want to take. But that's the last time I'll be doing that. Because right now, pencil in this shaky hand, I aim to write down one singular memory. Fast as I can. I could spend what I feel in my bones as my life's last clear hours to tell you of the Dust Bowl. Or the war. Or the French peonies. Or my wives, so many wives. Or the graves, so many graves. Or the goodbyes, so many goodbyes. Those memories come and go here at the end, if they come at all anymore. But not this memory. This memory is always with me, always alive, always within reach, and always in living technicolor from deadly start to bittersweet finish, no matter how old I keep getting. And red old man, sweet wild boy and girl, oh, how I miss you. All I have to do is close my worn-out eyes for the smallest of moments. And it begins. 1. New York Harbor. Boats were flying through the air, streets were flowing like rivers, electric lines were exploding like fireworks, and houses of shrieking people were being blown out to sea. The date was September 21st, the day of the Great Hurricane of 1938. The entire coast from New York Harbor to Maine got smacked so hard it was the stuff of legend, 700 souls gone to their final reward as wet as mackerels. Back then, you got no warning. You'd notice a storm over the water, and you'd be worrying how bad that cloud looks when the banshee wind and rain hits and you're scrambling for your life. The dock piling I'd wrapped my scrawny young self around got whipped airborne. Next thing I know, I'm waking up in a ditch with a tramp yanking on my cowboy boots. Seeing me rise from the dead, he yelped and ran. I was still in one piece somehow, if black, blue, and bloody, with only my suspenders popped off and gone. So as the rest of the living world began hollering for help or hearses, I wiped the dried blood off my face, grabbed hold of my trousers, and struggled to my feet. The boathouse where I'd been standing had blown away along with Cuz, my third cousin boss. Found him in a shallow pool of boat shards, a sloop's mast stuck straight through him. I wasn't much to look at even before my hurricane wallop, an overgrown farm boy with a face newly scarred and a neck sporting a birthmark the size of a state fair. Prize yam, but I sure looked better than Cuz. I'd say I was lucky, but I hadn't had enough of a relationship with the word to use it. I'd say it was the worst day of my life, yet it was already far from it. I can say this. I never thought I'd see a bigger Eiffel than that hurricane as long as I lived. But I was wrong. Because the last thing you think you're going to see in the middle of flipped boats, and buildings afire and bodies dangling and sirens wailing is a couple of giraffes. I'd been there not 6 weeks, dust bowl dirt still coating my young rowdy's lungs, and despite my God-fearing ma, that's what I was, a dirt farm rowdy, pure as a cow pie, cunning as a wild hog, and already well acquainted with the county sheriff, the dust layering my every breath leaving little room for the Holy Spirit to breathe on me. Cuz's bilge rat boathouse was where I landed after the dirty 30s blew so fierce in my corner of the Texas panhandle that every nester and sharecropper for miles was flung clean off the map. Some like my ma, pa, and baby sister left the hard way, 6 feet under. Some hit the road with the Okies to California. The rest, like me, headed toward any kin who'd take them in. The only family I had left in the world was an East Coast stranger to me named Cuz, who might as well have been the man in the moon to a 17-year-old panhandle boy. But there's being alone and there's being an orphan alone in an empty wasteland. Digging graves for all you ever loved with no one to ask for help except the sheriff, which I dare not do for reasons I cannot yet bear to confess. Sitting there by my ma's, pa's, and baby sister's graves, I let evening turn to morning. Still covered with the dead dirt that had killed us all, I dug up my ma's mason jar of coins from her withered garden and stumbled dry-eyed toward the highway. Not until a long hauler stopped his truck to ask me where I was headed did I find out I was mute. "You an Okie?" I tried to answer. Nothing came out. "Cat got your tongue, kid," the driver said. Still I couldn't spit out a word. Eyeing me good, he jerked a thumb toward his empty truck bed and dumped me at the Muleshoe train station, right across from the sheriff's office. I waited for the next train east with one eye back at his door, knowing I was unfit to answer questions he'd surely have if he saw me, and just as the train pulled away, the sheriff strode out to look straight at me looking straight back at him. Jumpy at every stop after that, I got as far as Chattanooga with my ma's coins. From there, I hopped a boxcar until I saw some tramps fling a bum off the train after stealing his shoes. Then I swiped a motorcycle and rode it until it ran out of gas, snitching food along the way like a stray dog, until I had some snitched from me by a bum with a straight razor. That got me hitching straight to Cuz, where I found myself eye to eye with more water than my thirsty eyes could take in. When Cuz asked me who the hell I was, I had to scrawl my answer with a coal lump on the dock, to which he harumphed. Figures I'd get a dumb one, being from that side of the family, and put me straight to work for my supper. For 40 silent days and nights, I called a moldy cot in the back of the boathouse home. Now I didn't even have that. Nobody was left to come look for me and nobody was newly dead-eyed mourn, 'cause proving himself to be such stone-hearted scum I was already plotting to snatch his cash and run. Holding up my pants in the hurricane rubble, I stood wobbly over what was left of the man I traveled half the USA to find, then reached around the bloody mast pole and picked his dead pockets. When I found nothing but his lucky rabbit's foot, I started kicking him so full of my own hurricane fury that I kicked myself back to speech. I was kicking and cussing 'cause the gray sky, the black ocean, the putrid air, my ma's precious Jesus and his cruel God Almighty Father, until I slipped and landed on my backside, eyes to the drizzling sky. With that, the log jam inside me busted wide, and I lay there sobbing like the lost boy I was. Finally, I struggled up on my boots again, tied up my trousers with a piece of soggy boat tether, and wandered back to the dock. There I sat, pure miserable, watching ship after ship limp into harbor. Until I saw the Giraffes. Up the dock, a storm-clobbered freighter was unloading. I don't remember getting to my feet or moving. I only remember standing in the middle of the freighter's crew in their blue dungaree uniforms, staring. There, before me, were 2 giraffes under a dangling crane that had just unloaded them like a pack of tires. One was alive and swaying inside a cracked but upright crate, the colossal beast's head thrusting up treetop tall. The other, lifeless, sprawled across the entire width of the dock, its crate crushed around it like an accordion. Back then, nobody knew much about giraffes, but in the little schooling I had before the dusk came, I'd seen a picture of one, so I was able to put a name to the wonder. Staring at the downed one, I was sure I was gazing at a real-life carcass of a real dead giraffe, until the carcass opened a brown apple eye to gaze up at me. And the deathly look in that eye sent a familiar shiver down my young spine. I knew all about animals. Some you worked, some you milked, some you ate, some you shot, and that was that. You learned early not to make a pig a pal, or your pa would soon be forcing you to thank Jesus for the blessing of eating everything but its squeal. Even feeding a stray dog would get you a whipping for taking food out of the family's mouth. "What's wrong with you? It's just an animal," my pa kept saying. There was no room for such weakness past being a boy in knickers, especially when, at the risk of hellfire, the worst 2-legged human was better than any soulless 4-legged animal. Or so I was taught. Problem was, whenever I locked eyes with an animal I felt something more soulful than I ever felt from the humans I knew, and what I saw in that sprawled giraffe's eye made me ache to the bone. The giraffe's eye had stopped moving, taking on a pallor I'd seen too many times in an animal's eyes right before my pa would be deciding whether to eat, bury, or burn them. I pushed in closer, waiting for the seamen, all looking like damp hell themselves, to shove me back where I belong. Instead they were suddenly parting like a dirty blue-red sea. Coming right at us was a shiny new truck with a wood contraption strapped to its long flatbed that would have made Rube Goldberg proud. Shaped like a squatty T, it looked like a 2-story homemade boxcar plopped down on the entire length of the truck bed, wooden window openings along the top, trapdoors along the bottom, and a short step-up ladder nailed on each side. I jumped out of the way as the driver, a goober-looking guy with cauliflower ears and enough Dapper Dan pomade on his hair to grease an engine, jerked the rig to a halt. The passenger door swung wide, and out crawled a leathery old man with a face like a mule. That's what I've called him all these years, the old man, but here and now as I write, older than old myself, I'd bet the farm he wasn't much past 50. He had on a rumpled jacket, a yellowed white shirt, and hangdog tie. One of his hands looked gnarled, and propped on the back of his head was an old fedora that looked like it had been stomped on so much it had forgotten whether it was pork-pied or pinched. Slamming the door, he seemed headed toward the mutton-chopped harbor master, who was waving what seemed to be a couple of telegrams his way. Instead, the old man tromped right past, striding to the giraffes as if unaware of any other living thing on the dock but the giants before him. First, he went to the upright crate with the standing, swaying giraffe, the male, and started talking to it low like secrets. The giraffe slowed. The old man reached in to gently stroke it, and the giraffe's swaying stopped. Getting down on his haunches by the sprawled female, he started up the same soft giraffe's beak. She began to quiver. He put his hand through the crushed crate slats to touch her, and as the giraffe lay still as doom, he began stroking her big head with that gnarly hand until she closed her eyes. For a moment, the only sound in the world was the giraffe's labored breathing and the old man's cooing against the waves lapping against the dock. Then the harbor master stomped over to shove the telegrams under the old man's nose. The old man took one look at them and tossed them to the ground, a fury flit crossing his face I knew far too well. He had him a temper, too. Right then, the ship captain appeared from the harbor master's hut, his uniform ripped and face bruised, and the dungarees turned toward him as one. The old man glared his way. "You kill my giraffe?" "Mister," the harbor master cut in. "They lost one of their mates out there, and it's a miracle they made it in with or without your fancy animals if that means a thing to you." The old man's face made it clear it did not. With that, the dungarees were all in a lather. I thought they just might pounce on him. From the look on his face, I thought he just might want it. "We got her here," a voice rang out, and you could almost hear the words left hanging in the air. "Now save her, you bastard." The old man, his hand still on the downed one's great head, didn't move. As the grumbling grew louder, though, a dented gray panel truck came rattling toward the rig from the street with a sign on its door so faded I could only make out the word "Zoo." Out from it hopped a stubby, well-scrubbed college boy type in a white coat clutching a black doctor bag. He strode past us like he was on a holiday, headed to the old man. "We've got to get her on her feet or she's done," the zoo doc said by way of hello. The old man motioned to the harbor master, who whistled over a couple of longshoremen with crowbars, who started yanking at the crushed crate around the tangled giraffe. But it wasn't fast enough for the old man. He started pulling at the smashed planks himself, gnarled hand and all. When there was nothing more to yank, the crane's harness, still around planks under her body and feet, went taut, groaning like it was alive as it pulled the giraffe upright. When she faltered, the dungarees rushed by me, plunging their hands in to help the old man steady her. With one more tug, everything went full upright and the harnessed female was up on 3 of her 4 feet in a flash, violently so, everyone but the old man jumping back. And there it was. Her back right leg, from knee to fetlock, looked as if someone had taken a ball-peen hammer to it. She wobbled, fighting to stay up on her 3 good spindly legs. "Steady, girl, steady," the old man purred as the zoo doc felt along her body. "Her internal organs seem intact," he said. "This leg's the telltale." I thought it was good news until I remembered they shoot horses for less. Opening his black bag, he cleaned, splinted, and wrapped the leg, then stepped back as the longshoreman lashed freight panels snug around her. When they were done, the old man, still cooing his giraffe's beak, reached in and uncinched the crane's harness. The girl teetered. Then she was standing on her own. Seeing that, the old man and the zoo doc started talking fast and low. I inched closer. "But if I reject her as unfit, it's a death sentence, and you know it," the old man was saying. The zoo doc frowned back at the T-shaped boxcar rig. "How long you hoping to take to get there?" 2 weeks if we make good time." The zoo doc shook his head. "Better cut that in half." The old man threw up his hands. "How can I do that? We got to go slow, even slower now because of that leg." "I'm saying a week tops because of that leg. You better start thinking how." "Fine. So?" Glancing back at sirens in the distance, the zoo doc fumed. "Go ahead and sign off for both. Don't want to disappoint Mrs. Benchley yet. They've got the time in quarantine to see if the young female stays tall, if we even get there. But Jones, if I were you, I'd tell Mrs. Benchley the whole truth, that even if the female's still upright before you hit the road, odds are your road trip will still do her in. Better if Mrs. Benchley hears it now instead of when you're figuring out what to do with a dead giraffe on the road." As the zoo doc left, the old man marched over to the harbor master and signed some papers. Then the crane grabbed. the patched crates and swung the giraffes over to a harbor flatbed, where longshoremen tied them down. With that, the backslapping dungarees scattered, the old man popped the rig's hood signaling a let's go to the goober driver as he climbed in, and I watched it all pass. Two colossal storybook animals from the other side of the world on the back of a harbor flatbed with a contraption rig trailing behind. I stared after the giraffes, knowing the moment I wasn't thinking about them I'd be forced to face my sudden return to life as a stray dog boy. Other creatures' miracles don't mean a thing when you're still working on your own. As the trucks got smaller and smaller, my wandering, wretched future got bigger and bigger. I took a breath. My ribs throbbed, and as the trucks kept on shrinking from view, I thought I might retch. Feeling something squish under my boot heel, I looked down. I was standing on the telegrams the old man had tossed on the wet dock. Scooping them up, I read them quick and remember them whole. Said the first. Said the second. The wet telegrams turned to mush and slipped through my fingers. But my eyes were still seeing that final bright and shiny word, a word with more storybook meaning than giraffe for a Dust Bowl boy. California. The giraffes were bound for the land of milk and honey. Moses and the chosen people couldn't have longed for the promised land any more than hardscrabble farm folks longed for California. Everybody knew all you had to do was find your way there without dying on the road or rail, and you'd live like a king plucking fruit from the trees and grapes from the vine. And how could anybody lose the way following a couple of giraffes? I felt my eyes grow as big as the thoughts I was thinking. I was miserable damp. I had an eye that was half swollen, a couple of teeth loose, a rib throbbing like a tom-tom, and an arm that wasn't working quite right. But it didn't matter a bit, because with that one bright, shiny word dancing before my eyes, I had something no Dust Bowl orphan had any business having. Although I was living in a time when such a thing was as likely to kill you as save you, I had a flickering hope. The giraffes turned the corner and vanished from sight. So I started to run, splashing through the water and the muck after them as fast as my bunged-up bones would go. For a mile, I ran along the cobblestones following the giraffes. Workers clearing the streets dropped their shovels to gawk. Firemen pulling a body by its arms from a storm drain stopped to gape. Linemen working on dangling electric lines paused in the sizzle to stare. Block after block, as storm-woozy people hung from windows calling to their pals to come look, I kept running behind the slow rigs, not knowing where we were going or what to do next. At the blocked Holland Tunnel exit, the rig stopped just as a motorcycle cop came roaring up, shouting at the rig drivers to follow him uptown, even though there were elevateds that way the high-riding crates would have to squeeze under. Lots of them. At the 9th Avenue elevated, a man riding with the flatbed jumped from the truck, pole in hand, brushed back a sizzling live wire, and measured the clearance. 1/8 of an inch, he yelled back. The flatbed slipped slowly under. The rig moved on to the next one a few blocks down. Again the pole man jumped out. 1/4 of an inch, he called back. Another couple of blocks. Half. On we went, this way and that, edging up through the city, minutes turning into hours. The East River was still flooding the nearby streets, and a factory was ablaze in between, so the cop kept us west. We skimmed Central Park, dozens of woebegone folks and wide-eyed ragamuffins gaping at the passing giraffes from under-soaked boards and walkways as if watching a dream. On we still went, until the George Washington Bridge was straight ahead. The cop was leading us to New Jersey. I panicked. I couldn't run over a bridge. Across the street, I saw a Joe hop off a motorcycle outside a storefront and rush inside, pointing back at the giraffes, the machine sliding to the puddled pavement like it was a 2-bit bicycle. It had barely hit the ground before I found my legs wrapped around it. With one eye on that motorcycle cop, I pumped that electric horse twice, skidded left then right like some bucking bronco, and held on. By the time I caught up with the giraffes on the bridge, 6 reporter cars appeared out of nowhere, sandwiching in around me, their camera guys hanging out the windows, flashbulbs flashing against the gloomy skies. On the other side, 2 New Jersey psycho cops took up the escort, dodging the storm's flotsam and jetsam, until the 2 big rigs bumped over a track by a deserted depot and stopped in front of a gated sign, U.S. Quarantine. Behind the gate were gabled tin-roofed brick barns spread out as far as the eye could see. We were at the federal quarantine station, where animals shipped into the country were inspected, from cows and horses to camels and oxen, and now giraffes. As the guard waved the 2 big trucks through, the reporters swarmed the gate. I stopped by a massive uprooted oak near the road and had barely turned off the cycle before they'd all rushed back to their cars, except for a fancy green Packard bumping to a stop behind me. A reporter in suit and tie with a fedora cocked just right got out of the driver's side and headed for the guard hut. "Wait here," he called up to his camera guy, who was crawling up on the Packard's hood. And the sight seared itself whole and perfect in my eyes, its sparkling so fresh even now in my old man's memory, because the camera guy was a camera gal. Much younger than the duded-up reporter, she had red curls all over her head, a fiery halo of raging waves she surely battled into submission every morning, and she was wearing trousers, the first woman I'd ever seen doing so in real life. There she stood, snapping pictures on the Packard's hood in her white girly shirt, 2-tone shoes, and 2-legged trousers. And there I stood, feeling like I'd been hurricane-walloped. Again. If it wasn't love at first sight, it was sure something painfully akin to it. "Oh, hello, Stretch. Are you here for the giraffes too?" Red said, looking down at me with eyes that about knocked me out on their own. They were hazel, and I must have moved closer in their sway. Because as she snapped a picture, she popped a flashbulb bright enough to blind a blind man. And me. "Lionel! Come quick!" I heard her yell. "Hey! Get away from her!" the reporter yelled, shoving me as I blinked back to sight. Stumbling, I scrambled away. "What did you do that for?" I heard her say as I ducked behind the downed oak. "I only thought you'd want to talk to him for the story, Mr. Big Reporter." "For God's sake, Audie, that kid's nothing but a tramping punk who'd slit your throat for chump change. Don't be naive. He was looking at you," the reporter said back. "Let's go. The guard said the giraffes are quarantined for 12 days. I've got all I need, and you've got time to get all you need without entertaining vagrants." A minute later they were gone. The cops were gone. The giraffes were gone. And I was miles from anywhere I knew, with night coming on, clueless for what to do next. I stowed the cycle behind the toppled oak, and I crouched down to watch and wait near a cow carcass. Just as I'd had all I could take of the skeeters feasting on my hide, the gray panel zoo truck jolted to a stop at the gate. As the guard waved the stubby zoo dock through, I started worrying whether the lame giraffe had stayed tall. I decided to see for myself. Spying where a raccoon had burrowed under the fence, I squeezed under. Mud caked down my backside, I hustled toward the biggest, tallest barn as the zoo truck, the empty harbor flatbed, and some Joes and khaki workduds were leaving. I peeked inside. The barn was full of shadows, its walls lined with haystacks. On the left was a cot, in the middle was the rig, and on the right was a sky-high wire pen holding. Both giraffes. The splinted girl giraffe had stayed tall. Finally out of their crates, they were facing each other, necks touching, scooched so close you couldn't tell where one ended and the other began. Like they couldn't much believe they were alive and were circling the wagons to keep it that way. The old man, Mr. Riley Jones, according to the telegram, was nowhere to be seen, but the driver had grabbed a big juicy apple from the truck's cab and was leaning against the rig eating it. I watched him chomp it down to nothing, then pitch the core into the hay, and I marked the spot. I hadn't eaten since before the hurricane, so even an apple core covered with goober spit could soon start looking good. During the hard times, being hungry was a basic state of being, at least for most folks I knew. After the dust killed off the livestock, dust bowlers were eating prairie dogs and rattlesnakes and making soup from tumbleweeds. When you don't know where your next meal is coming from, that's all life is. You're nothing but a feral thing chasing your hunger every minute of the day. Wiping his mouth with the back of his sleeve, the goober driver strutted over and rattled the pen's fence, spooking the giraffes, then laughed, and did it again. Rocking on my boot heels, fists clenched, I wanted so bad to relieve him of his front teeth that I didn't hear the old man returning until it was too late. I had to duck inside, diving behind a hay pile. Already barking orders at the driver, the old man marched right past. "Earl!" he yelled. "Come here!" Next thing I know, he's telling the driver to leave for the night and pushing the squeak-squawking barn doors shut behind him, trapping me inside. Cussing my fool self, I settled in to wait until I could figure out how to sneak out. Unseen. As night fell, the only sounds in the barn were the giraffes snorting and stomping. The old man flipped a metal lever on a wall panel near his cot. The dangling electric light lamps came on, and the place turned bright as day. And there I cowered, nothing between me and him but hay. If he looked my way, he would have seen me for sure. But he only had eyes for the giraffes. Watching the giraffes in a tender-hearted way, I couldn't quite figure for such a man. He started cooing his giraffe speak so soothingly it was calming me down. When he stopped, only the giraffe's quiet snuffling filled the air. He pulled the switch, the lights went off, and the barn went full dark except for an outside light streaming through the high wire windows, casting shadows across the barn. Then the old man flopped on the cot, and was soon snoring like a buzzsaw. Of course, that was my chance to sneak out. But there was still the matter of the produce waiting for the taking, and I had to take. So I headed quiet but quick to the rig's blind side, stepped on the running board, and spied 2 gunny sacks on the cab's seat, one with apples, the other sweet onions. Grabbing one from both, I stuffed the onion in my pocket and shoved the apple in my chompers, all but swallowing the thing whole. As I grabbed another onion, though, I felt eyes on me. Readying for a scrap, I spun around to see I had an audience. Not a dozen steps away, the giraffes had moved near the pen's fence, and they had both turned their long necks to stare at me. There are lots of things that can make a body freeze in its tracks. Having a couple of 2-ton beasts eyeing you from behind a flimsy piece of fencing is surely one of them. I should have been backing away. Instead, I inched nearer until I was by the pen, studying the living magnitude of them. From their huge hooves to their wide bodies and up their spotty necks to their knobby horns. I got a crick in my own long neck staring up at the giraffe's colossalness. They could knock this pen down, I recall thinking. Yet they weren't doing any such thing. In fact, the boy giraffe had now shut his eyes. He's sleep standing like my old mare, I realized, wincing at the memory. The girl, though, was still staring at me with those round brown apple eyes exactly like she'd done at the dock, except now she was staring down. Way down. Have you ever looked straight into the eyes of an animal? A tame one's figuring you out, what you're going to do and what that means to it. A wild one can chill you to the bone, surveying you for either supper or survival. But the gaze of that giraffe was different. It seemed to hold neither fear nor design. Her cantaloupe-sized nostrils snuffled the top of my head through the wire fence, and I let them, if only because I couldn't make my legs work. Blowing warm stink breath, she left my hair damp with giraffe spit. Then she bumped the fence with her snout, trying to get to the onion I was still clutching. I held it up. Her long tongue snaked through the wire and snatched it back through the fence, her neck rising to send it sliding down her long throat with a mighty gulp. Then she inched near again until the smell of her surrounded me. She smelled of fur, and ocean, and sweet foreign farm dung. Before I knew what I was doing, I'd reached my hand through the wire to touch a spot on her flank as big as a granny's but in the shape of a sideways heart. For the longest moment, we stood there like that, the rough feel of her warm pelt full on my outstretched hand, until I felt another tongue licking my fingers. It was the wild boy, his long neck stretching over the back of the wild girl to me. I jerked my hand out of the fence wire and his tongue followed, poking it through the fence to lick at my breeches pocket. He wanted my stashed onion. So I dug in my pocket to get it for him, and out came Cuz's lucky rabbit's foot with it, falling right through the fence wire to land by the girl's huge hoof. Not until I felt the boy's tongue flicking at my fist could I tear my eyes away from my lost Lucky Charm and serve up the onion. As both giraffes stomped and swished their tails at the onion delights, my eyes wandered back to Cuz's rabbit's foot still lying by the wild girl's hoof. Needing all the luck I could get, never mind how dead, lucky, Cuz was, I decided I had to get that rabbit's foot back. Ducking through the fence's opening, I was cocksure I could grab it quick and slick. As I closed my fingers around the rabbit fur, though, wild girl shuffled her hooves, and her wounded leg thumped me. Swiveling her big haunch, she bumped me so mightily that when I landed I bounced. Scrambling backward, I flung myself out of the pen. When I glanced back, she was giving me a look so offended that it had me all but begging her pardon. Just then, the old man snored loud enough to wake the next county and broke me out of my giraffe spell. Cramming the rabbit's foot in my pocket, I lurched toward the barn doors. I was halfway to them when I remembered the driver's produce free for the taking, and damn me, I had to take. Sneaking over to the truck's cab, I had loaded up my arms when I realized I wasn't hearing the old man's snores anymore. I was hearing the clomp of his boots. He was going to catch me where I stood unless I dropped the produce, and ran. And I wasn't about to drop that produce. To my left, waist high, was one of the contraption rig's trapdoors. Juggling the goober's food, I gave it a yank and to my young shock it opened. So I dove inside, landing in a mound of peat moss, produce falling everywhere. With no time to shut the trapdoor behind me, I waited to be yanked out by my ears, my heart pumping wild. But nothing happened. Hearing the old man's sweet giraffe cooing, I eased the trapdoor shut. In a moment, his boots shuffled past again, his snores started back up, and my heart slowed. Wolfing down all the produce I could find, I leaned my bunged-up bones back into the padding to rest a minute before trying to sneak out again. Instead, my eyes closed on their own. There was no fighting it. That day of days had its way. And as I fell into the sleep of the dead, I was sure I was already dreaming because I thought I heard the giraffes humming to each other. It was a low, purring, rumbling thrum, and it was as soothing as the old man's giraffe speak. Morning, sunshine! Time for breakfast. Someone's busting through the door behind me, and it jolts me from these scribbles so hard my heart jumps. Rubbing my chest, I start to yell go away at the orderly when out of the corner of my eye I see Wild Girl. Her long neck has reached in my 5th floor window, and she's blowing a snuffling spitball my way. Gaping at the impossible wonder of her, I feel the same clutch around my heart on first spying her and boy down the dock, and I'm glad to still be alive to feel it again. I heard you were a bad boy last night. Punching the TV? My goodness! The orderly is saying, standing there in his starchy whites. And now you're late for breakfast. It's an orderly I do not like. He's greasy-haired like Earl the driver and talks to me like I'm simple, his voice as irritating as crotch itch. He's only inches from Wild Girl and I worry he'll spook her. Not going, I say quick. He grabs my wheelchair handles. Sure you are. Come on. I grab the desk. I can't go, I'm too busy, I try to say, but my heart stutters MPHGH and I almost drop my pencil. Greasy steps back. Okay. Clutching the blessed wooden thing, I glance at Wild Girl, who is shooting me the stink eye. Don't give me that look, I wheeze. I'm not stopping, I swear. I'm going to tell her the whole thing, I say, writing this down. See, girl? What girl? Greasy says as I scribble. Who you talking to, sunshine? Another orderly pokes his nose in from the hall. That shriveled-up beanpole busted the TV? He whispers to Greasy, thinking I can't hear. Yeah, and now he's talking to a dead girl, whispers Greasy. You gonna report it? Whispers Hall voice. Nah. We'd be reporting them all, whispers Greasy. Just shoot me if I get that old, Hall voice goes on. I tell you one thing, you don't want him so worked up he checks out on your shift. It's gross. One did it to me yesterday. Hey, what's he doing now? He's riding like a fool on fire over there. Wait, he's not writing down what I just said, is he? You bet I am, I say, scribbling faster. Now, sunshine, croons Greasy. We're leaving, okay? And shut the door, I yell. I'm stuck in the rig and we've got to hit the road. 2. In Athenia. Hush-a-bye / don't you cry / go to sleep, little baby. Brown apple eyes stare. The rifle fires. Woody Nickel, tell me what happened out there and tell me now. The next morning, angry voices jerk me out of the nightmare, dogging me every time I fell asleep since leaving home. Slow down on the apples and sweet onions, Earl. But I swear I ain't eating more in my share, Mr. Jones. Who else has been eating them? The giraffes? I sat up dazed and bug-eyed until I remembered where I was and why. Light was streaming in the trap window above me. I'd slept the whole night. Groaning, I fell back into the peat moss padding. Unless I made a run for it, my sorry hide was stuck inside the rig's traveling giraffe crate for the whole day. There were worse places, though, for a Dust Bowl boy to be stuck. It was dry, and so was I for the first time in 2 days. So, shaking the peat moss out of my pants, I took my first good look around. The contraption was less a big crate than a boxcar suite, a fancy Pullman car for giraffes, with a wide slit between the sides for the giraffes to see each other. Rail riders would never leave a boxcar so nice. The crate's walls were so padded with plump burlap and the floors piled so high with moss that I knew I'd be doing worse in any hurricane shelter, or in the back of Cuz's boathouse. Hell, even in my shack of a farmhouse back home, what with the constant wind blowing through the slats to drive even a saint insane. Climbing up on the 2x4 bracing the crate's wall, I cracked open one of the trap windows enough to see the giraffe pen. The giraffes were standing with their necks touching again. Earl had schlupped over with full water buckets, and while Wild Boy was as mellow as milk, Wild Girl seemed to have a burr up her but enough for both of them. Because, to my delight, when he stepped in the pen to set down the buckets, she charged him. He scrambled out so fast he landed flat on his back. Then, grumbling at Earl, the old man entered the pen and inched around Girl's back leg to check the bandage splint. The zoo doc had wrapped it good, maybe too good, because Girl's long neck started swaying, left, right, and when the old man touched the splint, she raised that hurt back leg and kicked sideways, W-H-O-P. Whacking the old man's thigh so hard, it sent him and his fedora flying. I cringed. Giraffe's kick. That could have been me the night before. A kicking mule can kill or cripple a man for life, much less a kicking 2-ton giraffe, so I expected the old man to either be dead or wishing he was. While a mule has one kicking gear, though, the giraffe seemed to have plenty of gears to express its displeasure that weren't so deadly. Because instead of being dead or worse, the old man was grabbing his hat and scrambling out of the pen. If a mule kicked Pa'd let him have it with an axe handle. Not the old man. He didn't even utter a harsh word toward the giraffe. The driver skittered over to help, but the old man waved him away, like he got kicked by a giraffe every day. I need to send a telegram, he grunted, popping the fedora back on his head. Then, trying not to limp, he headed for the barn doors. Hearing the barn doors squawk, I knew it was my chance to go. But then I felt the rig jostle and I peeked out. Earl was standing on the running board again, reaching into the truck cab. He came out with a flask. He took a mighty swig, then stashed it back in his hiding place. When I heard him flop down on the cot out of sight, I eased open the trapdoor and crawled up backward, searching for the ground. Just as the squawk of those blasted barn doors filled the air. And I met the old man. What the? As my boots hit the dirt, I felt him grab my arm, and I did what I always did when I got grabbed. I threw a punch. The old man saw it coming and slapped it away. So I did the only thing left to do. I rushed right at him, knocking us both on the ground. Scrambling up, I ran out the barn doors to the sound of him bawling out, "Burl!" at the top of his lungs. At my raccoon hole, I slid under and ran until I couldn't see the quarantine station anymore. Then I leaned on a broken tree trunk to catch my breath and think. Following the giraffes to California wasn't going to be a cinch any longer. The old man had seen me. I was at a loss for what to do, so I started walking, the sort of aimless kind of walking that drifting, vacant-eyed Joes did back in the hard times, putting one foot in front of the other, over and over, until I wandered into a country store and tried snitching a loaf of bread. "I saw that, you piece of road trash!" the grocer hollered, grabbing my shirt and ripping it clean off my back at the door, sending the bread flying into a puddle. I kept moving, but not before scooping up that muddy loaf. "That's it!" yelled the grocer. "I'm calling the sheriff to clear your kind out again." With the word sheriff thundering in my ears, I stuffed both cheeks with soggy bread and ran until I felt safe. Feeling as low as a snake, my bony chest now bare to the wind except for my holey undershirt, I wandered into a tramp camp near a side track as a freight train was passing by, and I knew this was what the grocer meant when he said, "You're kind." Gulping down the last of the filthy bread, I watched a tramp running for a boxcar already full of rail riders, high-stepping to keep from being dragged under, and my stray dog Future hit me in the face. Who was I fooling thinking I could buck it? Yet I couldn't shake the longing for milk and honey the California-bound giraffes had given me, and I felt my flickering hope turn flaming do or die. That's what the tiniest speck of hope did to you back then. Got you making plans and dreaming dreams in the face of a fool's folly that hung on a couple of giraffes. You clutched it, nursed it, kept it safe and warm, because that was the only difference between you and the vacant-eyed Joes aimlessly walking, dead before their time. So soon I found my way back to the deserted depot in front of the quarantine station's gate, when nothing had changed at all, including the hurricane-whopped cow. Even my thieves' cycle was where I'd hid it behind the big toppled oak. What I didn't expect was the green Packard. Red and the duded-up reporter were stopped exactly where I'd last seen them. I snuck within a few feet of them again, crouching behind the oak. They were standing by the Packard, and I didn't much like the way he was talking to her. "Lionel Abraham Lowe, Life magazine," she was saying as she reloaded her camera. "For the love of God, will you shut up about it? Now let's go. I did you a favor driving you out here again. But no more." "You know I can't drive," she answered, lifting her camera. "And I have to have more. It's Life magazine. Augie, I've got to go." When she didn't stop, the reporter did something I couldn't abide. He grabbed her arm. Before I knew I was even doing it, I'd run over and punched him. Howling, he fell back against the Packard, grabbing his nose. You're going to jail, you little shit," he sputtered. "Augusta, take his picture and then get the guard to call the cops." Red, though, was staring at me, still standing there staring back, fists up. I was so besotted with her, I'd punched but forgotten to run. "Damn it, my shirt's ruined," the reporter moaned, whipping out a handkerchief to staunch the blood. "Augie, I said snap this son-of-a-bitch." But instead of taking my picture, she mouthed go. And I finally remembered to run. As I waited for the giraffes to hit the road, I spent the afternoons snitching food from anybody but the country grocer, and I spent the nights huddled on the deserted depot's platform fighting off sleep for fear of my nightmare. Since leaving home, the hours awake in the dark alone with my thoughts hadn't been much better than my haunted sleep. My mind would wander back to the sights of my family's graves and the sounds of my ma's and baby sister's gasps as the dust pneumonia slowly strangled them dead. There was no waking up from that. Lying under the stars that first night at the depot, though, I wasn't seeing graves and hearing death rattles. I was seeing the wondrous sights and sounds of Red and the giraffes. Even then, I knew I was probably better off never seeing Red again since I'd punched the reporter. Telling myself it was to protect my California plan, though, I wished I could visit the giraffes. As I lay there thinking about it, sleepless but less lonely, I kept feeling them snuffling my hair and nibbling at my pocket, unaware the giraffes were already working their giraffe magic on me far beyond my orphan boy scheme for them. By the next afternoon, I'd swiped a shirt from a clothesline to fend off nightly skeeters before I returned to the depot. Once there, the time passed slow. I swatted flies and shifted with the wind as the bloated cow ripened. I watched the guard chew and spit. I watched trucks come and go. That was it. Until Red appeared. Alone, and driving. Badly. Bouncing that fancy Packard over the tracks, she jerked to a grinding halt, all but stripping the gears. For the longest time, she stared toward the gate with a far-off look, not even taking a picture, and I drank in the fiery sight of her doing it. My insides turning to mush with each red curl she pushed off her face. When she finally got out to take photos by the gate, I found myself peeking in the Packard's open window. I'd have said I was scrounging for food if caught, but that wasn't why. I wanted more. More of her. I'd have been happy with only a whiff of her eau de toilette in the air, but there on the seat was a brand new notepad. When she drove away without noticing it was gone, I hunkered down, notepad in hand, beside the tree trunk and opened it. Stuck inside the front page was a fresh news clipping, written by Lionel Abraham Lowe. Mr. Big Reporter. The next page was filled with her scribbled notes. Hurricane Sea Survival Miracle. Manhattan Floods Afire. Psycho Cops. New York and NJ. Normal Truck. Custom-built bed. Putrid bloated cow, Guernsey. Bronx Zoo vet. Why? Tall, gaunt, battered, handsome boy with a nice uppercut. Who? First CA Giraffes. First female zoo director. First USA cross country. Lincoln or Lee Highway. How? 12 days to figure. Red had mentioned me. Even better, she'd called me handsome. Nobody'd ever done that before. Hoping for more, I turned the page, but there was nothing else until the very last page, where she'd started a list. Things I'm doing before I die: meet Margaret Burke White, Amelia Earhart, Eleanor Roosevelt, Belle Benchley, touch a giraffe, see the world, starting with Africa, speak French, learn to drive, have a daughter, see my photos in Life magazine. It looked like what people nowadays call a bucket list, as in things to do before kicking the bucket. I'd soon find out, though, that was not the half of it. The next day she came back, and when she wasn't looking, I dropped the notepad back into the Packard window. Her smile when she found it was pure glory. After that, waiting for her to appear kept me at the depot as much as waiting on the giraffes. The daily sight of her turned my depot nights fighting off nightmares and dark panhandle memories into hours of recalling her instead. I'd start with her hair, memorizing every fiery curl. I'd study the memory of her smile, the widow's peak on her forehead, each freckle on her nose, the curve of her face and figure, savoring every little detail from silky white shirt to tailored trousers and two-toned shoes, even the camera she clutched like a lover, until I'd stop and drown for a while in the memory of her hazel-eyed gaze. Then, as the nights wore on, I began imagining how I might kiss her. Besotted as I wasn't fool enough to think I'd ever kiss Red for real. For all I knew, I'd never get that close to her again. Yet I whiled away untroubled hours working on it all, how I'd place my hand on the back of those flaming curls. How I'd lace my fingers through their thick strands. How I'd either come in slow and sweet and tender, or sweep her up, planting a big one on her, fearless and lusty, like a full-grown man. I'm not ashamed to admit that it's warming up a scribbling old man right now as I remember the remembering. And when I'd feel myself getting sleepy huddled there on the depot's platform, I'd start over. But nobody can run from sleep forever. After a few nights, despite all my efforts, I nodded off, and the familiar old nightmare came. Hush-a-bye / don't you cry / go to sleep, little baby. It's time I made a man out of you. Woody Nickel, tell me what happened out there and tell me now. Brown apple eyes stare, the rifle fires, and rushing waters roar. Lil one, who you talking to? Bolting to my feet, I started pacing. I could still hear the parts of the nightmare I'd come to know too well. My ma singing, my pa yelling, and my rifle firing, surprised like always not to feel the county sheriff yanking me off the muleshoe train. This time, though, in the same old nightmare there was something new. And it shook me up good. There's a family story my ma loved to tell, how as a toddler I kept slipping from my slatboard crib only to be found in the barn with the mare, jabbering away. Lil one, who you talking to? My ma'd say. When I'd point to the mare, she'd sweep me up singing the hush-ah-bye lullaby. Other times she'd find me jabbering out near the prairie high grass, and when she'd say, Lil one, who you talking to? I'd point to the edge of the high grass where there'd be a rabbit, or a lizard, or a field rat scuttling away. But when my nap-time jabbering started being about things beyond my ken, like the preacher coming or a storm brewing or the rooster croaking, Pa's jaw muscles would quiver as Ma praised Jesus, calling it the gift of second sight just like her Aunt Beulah, who talked to the birds. So Pa set about breaking me of it. That's all it ever was, only a story Ma'd tell, until I was blown speechless by the dust only to be whopped senseless by a hurricane and found myself pacing the deserted depot. Because not only had I just heard Ma's lil one question, but I'd also heard rushing water, and if there's one thing we didn't have in the panhandle it was water, rushing or otherwise. So, as I paced, bug-eyed over sudden thoughts of Aunt Beulah and her second sight, I swore to never sleep again. Not even thoughts of the giraffes or kissing Red could calm me. After that, sleepless and twitchy, I counted down the rest of the days and nights waiting for the giraffes to hit the road. I barely left the depot for fear I'd miss them. Finally, the zoo doc's truck appeared and disappeared through the gate. It was time. Sprinting to my raccoon hole, I squeezed under and rushed to the tall barn. The big doors were yawning wide, and there was the zoo doc's truck. Lurking near the doc's truck, I should have been worrying about being seen, but I'd have had to drive a cattle truck into the barn for any of them to look around, especially the old man. He had bigger problems. He was trying to board the giraffes and the giraffes weren't having it. The rig was pulled up close to the pen and the entire side of the rig's boxcar T contraption was open, including the top. I hadn't seen it could do that. With swinging hinges on the bottom and latches along the top, the entire side lay down to the ground. It made the padded crates look big, wide, even inviting. 2 short sloping chutes had been placed between the pen and the rig to guide the giraffes into their new traveling compartments. But those giraffes knew what a crate was, nice or not, and they sure knew what a truck was. They'd both taken 2 steps into the chutes, saw where they were headed, and stopped cold. How long they'd been in the chutes I couldn't say, but from how worn out the old man looked, it had been a while. Fidgeting with his fedora, he was sitting on his haunches in his undershirt, staring at the giraffes. The zoo doc was standing by the chutes, staring at Girl Splint. Earl was standing by some Joes and khaki work duds, all breathing hard. The old man got to his feet. Looking pure frustrated, he stalked over and grabbed some rope, and he, the zoo doc, and the khaki Joes tried roping the giraffes like calves to pull them in. Still, the big beast didn't budge, and the old man slid back to the ground, looking clean out of ideas. Then Wild Girl's nostrils started quivering, her neck stretching toward the rig compartment where I'd slept. She took a step. Then another. Sticking her big snout into the open compartment's corner, she came up chomping. She'd found one of the onions I'd lost in the padding. The old man, no fool, was back up on his boots. Grabbing the gunny sack from the cab, he began pitching onions into the boxcar suite, and lickety-split, Girl strode right into the peat moss searching for the produce. The old man pitched the rest into the other compartment, and there went Boy. At that, everybody rushed in to raise both sides and latch them tight. When the two giraffes stuck their big heads out their windows, licking their lips for the last taste of their onions, the old man took off his hat and heaved a great sigh. Then he and the zoo doc marched toward the doc's truck, right where I hid. I scrambled behind a barrel. "You're going to have to reapply the sulfa to the wound on the road," the zoo doc was saying. "How many times depends on the roughness of the ride and how long you're forced to ride. If you can stave off infection, she's got a fighting chance." He grabbed an extra black bag from the truck and popped it on the hood to show off the contents: bandages, splints, and medicine bottles, then handed it to the old man. "Pack this for them, with extra for the two of you." The zoo doc shook the old man's hand, got in the truck, and with a last "good luck," drove away. The old man let the giraffes get used to their traveling boxcar suites for the rest of the day, so I settled in behind the barrel and waited through the night. Before dawn, the old man threw the barn doors open. Earl was already behind the rig's wheel, engine idling, and the giraffes' heads were out. With a last look back, the old man climbed in the truck cab and the rig rolled out the doors. Rushing to my fence squeeze-hole, I all but beat them to the front gate. Their lights flashing in the pre-dawn dark, 2 New Jersey State cycle cops were waiting and escorted the giraffe rig onto the road. I dragged the thieved cycle from under the downed oak, cranked it sputtering, spewing, backfiring to life, and, after a mighty rub of Cuz's rabbit's foot, I followed. California here? We come, I thought, with nothing between but the entire USA, sea to shining sea. Little did I know I wasn't the only one with plans for the giraffes, and worse, that those plans included never getting to California at all. Han? Someone's at my door again, jangling me out of my scribbling. Before I can do a thing about it, in strides another orderly. I start to growl at him, but it's a her. She's flame-haired. Familiar. Then I remember. She's the big-boned red-headed gal I like. Rose? Rosie? Yeah, Rosie. You didn't come to breakfast, Han. The chaplain will be here soon for chapel. Why don't you let me to take you down? It's Sunday morning. I never go. Which doesn't keep them from asking. It's a kindness in their minds to offer, seeing as each Sunday could be the last chance for us old reprobates to rectify. Today may be my last chance. But these scribbles are my rectifying. I study her face a second and then turn back to my writing pad. I'm busy. Han, do you recognize me? She says next. Course I do. I mutter over my shoulder. Oh, Han, it's been such a long time. You used to make me play a game of dominoes and hear a story before you take your pills, remember? She is saying. I heard about the giraffes. I'm so sorry. But then I hear her reach over and close the window. Whirling around too fast, my wheelchair bumps the bedstead and I almost fall out. Open it! Open it! She pushes the window back up. Wild girl is still there. My heart starts stuttering MMPH again and I rub it. Rosie notices. I'd better call the nurse right now to give you a pill. No! No nurses. No pills. I got to think straight to write it all down for her. Rosie settles her hands on her sturdy hips to look me up and down, exactly like the old man used to do. Pushing a graying strand of hair behind her ear, she says, Okay, but I'm staying until you calm down. Suit yourself. I say, calm as a clam, then return to my writing pad, hoping that will hush her. It does not. Han, who is her? Who are you writing it all down for? I don't answer. Is it Augusta Red? I almost jerk my neck off looking around. How do you know about Red? She's in all the stories you told me while we played dominoes. Augusta Red, the old man, and the giraffes. Is that what you're writing down, your trip? But you always said it didn't matter. I was wrong, I mumble, calmly, and start back writing. For a few minutes she perches her big self on the edge of the bed. Then, hearing her get up, I watched her close the door behind her, remembering it all. A game of dominoes and a story. 3. Across New Jersey and Delaware. So we hit the road. Being on the road's no song, though. Not if you're astray. There's nothing more pitiful than a wandering creature who was never meant to be wild. By the time a stray dog showed up at our Panhandle farm, it had that scary all's lost look that made even my saintly Christian ma run it off. She'd never have believed she'd turn away a stray boy though, and I know you'd want to believe you'd do the same. But there were thousands of us back then, wandering, hapless, and reckless. What if you lived by the tracks? Or the highway? What if your place got marked as the home of a kind-hearted Christian or a Roosevelt bleeding heart so that you had dirty bums and feral boys knocking on your screen door night and day? Would you lock your doors and close your curtains? Would you hide your little ones in your own house? What if a tramp starts waving a straight razor or glass shard at the competition hiding in your shrubbery? Would you call the police or reach for your shotgun? You won't remember all that back then, and I'm glad of it. I've tried to forget what it was like as a stray boy heading toward cuz. I was barely human after the first wretched few days, and as time went on I cared less about being so. When your shriveled stomach's aching with hunger, you forget all about your hungry heart. And you keep on forgetting it a little each day until a stray dog has more heart or soul than you. Then, there were the roads themselves. What we called highways were barely tolerable for transporting people, much less chauffeuring giraffes. The country's only two transcontinental auto trails were so singular they had names, the Lincoln and the Lee, and we weren't near either of them. Most town-to-town roads still had little more than a gas station guy pointing you the right way or the dead end gone. Wrong. During the hard times, taking them any stretch at all could mean taking your life into your own hands, which I was aiming to avoid by following the giraffes. So, while I should have been quaking at the thought of hitting the road again, I was okay as long as I could see the rig. As the sun came up, though, it began to wobble. It was as if, spooked by daylight, the giraffes didn't know where to stand in this new fresh hell they were in, their heads popping in and out, the back of the rig swaying and rocking, one time even lifting the tires right off the road so bad I thought they might flip over and finish themselves off before we'd even got started. The old man, though, started screaming at Earl until the rig slowed to a crawl, the giraffes got their balance, and everything simmered down. With that, the cycle cops started poking us down the entire length of New Jersey. In the first burg, people were so surprised, a few sleepy neck-twisting guffaws were all anybody could muster before we were gone. By the second, though, the people seemed to know the giraffes were coming. The rig was met by the local patrol car at the city limits. As the cops and the rig inched turtle slow through town, I found myself in a sudden parade. Cars and bicycles fell in behind. Old men waved from stools and steps and bungalow porches. Women in house dresses stood on verandas holding up babies. Townspeople lining the sidewalks were holding up newspapers, and a boy running alongside me kept waving one in my face, so I snatched it, giving the front page a quick glance as we kept rolling. While I didn't pay it much mind at the time, the top headline was one for the ages. Thinking of that headline now, I get a shiver. It was talking about the Munich Agreement, a thing that sounds like something nobody would remember this side of schoolbooks, but the whole world would soon be remembering it far too well. Hitler had seized Austria and was now wanting a chunk of Czechoslovakia, promising peace if he could have it. The spooked allies handed it right over, believing in fairy tales told by a madman. Back then, though, what was that to me on the other side of the world? Giving Adolf Hitler no thought at all, I flipped the paper over and there was the story everybody but me had already seen. I pulled over to the curb to read it, but I didn't get past the headline. Because, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a sight that made me drop the paper and jerk my head clean around, a green Packard. There it went, right by me, with red hanging out the window snapping pictures and the reporter behind the wheel. As we left the town behind, I kept expecting it to peel off and disappear home again, like before, but it kept following. So now I was following it too. We moved on like that all morning in a sort of rhythm, farmland quiet, dumbstruck hitchhikers, small towns, local cops, sudden parades, and jubilating townies yelling the same gee-hoos. "How's the weather up there? I'm seeing spots before my eyes. Low bridge!" Then, with no warning, the New Jersey psycho cops gave one last salute to the old man and vanished back the way they came. We were at the state line, which was all good and fine, except the state line was a river and there wasn't any bridge to the other side. There was a ferry, a boat, taking us over water. And that was no small thing, considering water had tried to kill both the giraffes and me. The old man didn't look too happy about it either. As the rig came to a stop at the landing, he hopped out and held up the line until getting some sort of satisfaction from the ferryman. He took off that grungy fedora, wiped at his brow with the back of his sleeve, and watched as the ferryman guided Earl to roll the rig on. When it came to a stop, the old man put his hat back on, heaved a great fume, and stepped on board himself. As other cars filled in behind, I bided my time. Then, with a rub of my rabbit's foot, I took a deep breath and walked the cycle on. As we pushed off, every last person on that ferry silently got out of their cars to gaze at the giraffes. The sight of those big giraffe heads stuck out their windows against the reflection of the smooth river made me go silent, too, inside and out. It was a magical thing. My rowdy young self fought the warm feeling, but I remember the moment as wondrous. We were moving across the Delaware River with giraffes, and I think we could have done it without a motor. The calmest of us all seemed the giraffes themselves. Whether the river's flow was so still they didn't notice it was water or whether they'd made peace with their road pullman, they were riding free and easy. I looked around for Red, hoping she was snapping pictures of it, but the green Packard wasn't on the ferry. Spinning around, I scanned the shoreline. There it was, still on the landing. Red and the reporter were in front of it, and my warm feeling turned into flitting fury at what I saw next. He motioned toward the car. She threw up her hands. He grabbed her arm again. She jerked it back. He got back in the car, slammed the door, and gunned the motor, waiting for her to follow. But she didn't. Not at first. Instead, she turned and stared back at the giraffes. I studied Red's gaze as we moved farther and farther away, her face full of things I did not understand yet was desperate to remember before she vanished from sight. I was certain I'd never see her again, and I watched long after I could no longer make out the green of the car or the fire of her hair. When the ferry landed on the other side, everybody made way for the giraffes and their rig, like the old man was the king of Siam with passing wonders to behold. As the giraffes' heads disappeared over the riverbank, nobody moved. Under the spell of giraffes and ferries and rolling river, they stayed that way for so long I thought I'd never get off. Snaking around them all, I revved the cycle, fearing I'd lose sight of the giraffes. But there they were, those giraffe heads high, proud, and impossible to miss, and I slowed back to a calm putter. Soon, we crossed another state line, which seemed to be coming as quick as county lines in Texas. "Welcome to Maryland," the sign said. The rig slowed down even more, the road curving this way and that, with tractors, pickups, and even a horse-drawn wagon pulling in and out between us. Then the road took a sharp bend and the rig disappeared. Next thing I heard was the sound of screeching tires, followed by a sickening thud and a deathly howl. My flesh crawling, I inched around that curve, and what I saw made me veer for the cover of the ditch's overgrowth. The rig was stopped dead in the middle of the road, and something big was lying by its right fender, spun halfway into the ditch. I was sure Earl had hit a hitchhiker. But it was a mangy stray dog, as big as a pony, and its bowels were hanging out of its bloody, shredded fur. Ordering Earl to stay put, the old man took the rifle from the cab's gun rack and moved toward it. He eased down by the dying dog, gun in his lap, as the dog went full into its death jerks. When the panting and jerking kept on going and going, the old man rose and cocked the rifle. Between one panting jerk and the next, though, the dog went still. Lowering the gun, the old man paused. Then, hunkering down again, he laid a hand on the dead dog's fur and left it there, like he was offering up some sort of old man benediction. As I watched, in my mind's eye I was in the panhandle driving Pa's pickup as we hit something yellow, and saw it tumble into the brush. Pa got out to cuss the dented fender, and I'd just taken the rifle from the gun rack when Pa turned his cusses on me. God damn it, son! Where you going? If it's a coyote, we shoot coyotes for being coyotes. If it's a stray dog, we ain't wasting a bullet on it. Stop acting like you're still in knickers. They're just animals. Up ahead, the old man got to his feet, grabbed the cur's leg, and dragged the carcass full off the road. The giraffes were watching, their heads out their windows. So he climbed up to give them both a pat on their necks, his giraffe's beak wafting back to me on the wind. Then he crawled back in the cab and the rig moved on, vanishing around the next curve. I eased the cycle past the carcass, storing the scene away to ponder. With the next turn of the road, though, I had bigger worries. The cycle's gas gauge was hazarding empty, and there I was without a dime or a dollar. I kept on following. What else could I do? With me riding on fumes and sundown on its way, we were closing in on a town called Conowingo, which sticks in my memory for more reasons than the peculiar sound of it. Trees lining the right, the road veered near a quick-moving river on the left, and stayed. Then came the signs. One-way bridge, said the first one. LOW water crossing, warned the next. I could barely believe it. Were they really going to drive those giraffes right into the river? From one second to the next, though, none of that mattered a whit, since that was the moment the cycle gulped, chugged, and clunked to a stop. Pounding the clutch, I jumped up and down on the throttle like I could pump ethyl into the cycle with just my hopping, and I kept it up beyond all good sense, wearing myself clean out. Sucking wind, I stared after the shrinking rig, realizing, like a stab to the heart, I was about to say goodbye to my California plan. It's over, I told myself, thinking how I'd sell my soul for a not-to-be, and considering I hadn't yet quite become acquainted with my soul, that was a surprising thought. So, fueled by the same do-or-die fury I'd felt on the dock, I started running, thinking I might as well die from the running than the standing and watching my flickering hope fade. But then, this side of the bridge, the rig slowed to a crawl. And I began to wonder if I had bargained away my worthless, thieving soul. Because the rig disappeared into the trees past a sign that said, "Auto camp and cabins turn here." Sprinting back to the cycle, I started pushing the dead machine toward the sign, my heart pumping so hard I was gulping air. By the time I made it to the entrance, the rig was idling by the office that also doubled as an 8-stool lunch counter serving up supper from the looks of the backsides parked on the stools. Hustling out of sight, I saw the old man and the manager appear from inside. As the manager pointed the way, they rolled the giraffes toward the last of a handful of tiny cabins, each barely big enough for a bed, parking the road Pullman under a spreading sycamore tree. I pushed the motorcycle through the underbrush and crept behind a boulder to watch the old man open the rig's top and the giraffes' big snouts stretch to nibble at the sycamore. In mid-nibble, though, both giraffes turned their quivering snouts my way, like they'd gotten a whiff of my ripe young self on the wind. I ducked out of sight, but when I looked back, they were still doing it. Wild Girl's snout was even swaying, like she was jockeying for a better smell. I was so sure they were going to give me away, I ducked full behind the boulder and stayed there until I heard the trapdoors flop open. And the old man ordered Earl to water the giraffes. I could see the giraffes' hooves through the trapdoors. The driver shoved in Wild Boy's water bucket with no problem. But when he shoved in Girl's, her hoof popped his arm hard enough to make him cuss and stumble back, which pleased me greatly. Then, determined to check that bandaged splint, the old man went into his own dance with Wild Girl. He waited until her splinted fetlock was near the opening, then reached in. She kicked. He dodged, she kicked again, and he plunked down on the running board to glare at Earl, who was standing so far away he was halfway to me. That's when the manager marched up with a pile of hamburgers from the lunch counter and brought everybody with him. Trailing behind came all the diners, including the driver of a shiny dairy truck parked near the road who offered up jugs of fresh milk to go with the burgers. The hamburger smell was making me crazy, so I pulled out a pilfered potato and ate it raw to keep from doing anything stupid. When the manager shooed everybody away, I knew the whole county was about to hear what was parked at the camp. As the sun went on down, the giraffes kept nibbling from the sycamore, but with each change of the breeze, they were still turning their sniffing snouts toward me. So I stayed put until the only light was from the office lamp poles streaming through the trees. Peeking out, I saw the old man wave Earl to the cabin. Ease down on the truck's running board, and pat himself a cigarette from a Lucky Strike pack. That he could afford store-bought smokes, instead of rolling his own, was an impressive sight for my farm boy eyes. As he flicked open his Zippo and lit up, I decided everybody in California must be as rich as a Rockefeller, which made me ache all the more to keep on following. I eyed that dairy truck, dreaming of milk if not honey, and I took another bite of my potato, picking sweet grapes from a California vine in my mind. Finding a mossy soft spot against a boulder, I settled in to watch as the old man smoked one Lucky after the other, lighting the new one from the butt of the old. As always, I wasn't about to let myself fall asleep if I could help it, so I stayed up hour after hour with the old man, spending the time plotting how I could keep following them. Since I wasn't much good at planning ahead, my ideas stunk. I could use the gas pump out front, but I'd have to first find a dime or a dollar in somebody else's pocket. I could snitch another vehicle, but the snitch-worthy ones were already gone. The only other vehicle at the camp was the dairy truck, which would fill my stomach but wasn't exactly prime thieving material. The later it got, the more desperate and stupid my ideas got. When I was seriously considering jumping on the back of the rig like I'd jump a freight train, I gave up. By and by, the old man woke Earl for his watch, ordered him to close the rig's top, and then disappeared inside the cabin. Putting a chaw of tobacco in his jaw, Earl slicked back his hair with both hands. Then, forgetting all about closing the top, he did what I feared he'd do. With a last look back at the old man's cabin, he pulled out the hidden flask and started tippling, swigging right past that tobacco juice, a combination only a souser could love. When he parked himself on the running board, both giraffes poked their heads out their windows, took one look down at Earl, and pulled their heads right back in. But not before Girl quivered her big nostrils one last time my way. For the next hour, I watched Earl tipple and spit until he was leaning his lolling head against the rig's door. The only thing keeping him upright was his tobacco juice making him hack and cough, which might have been his goober plan. Finally, when he slumped over sideways, I thought I heard sniggering somewhere beyond the rig. That got me up on my boots. From the shadows, 3 yahoos appeared, one of them with enough meat on his bones to make 2 of me, another one in nothing but overalls, and the third one a pipsqueak with a pudding bowl haircut. After nudging Earl's slumped lump, which upped the yahoo's sniggering, the jumbo one rapped a knuckle on the road Pullman. Both trap windows flew open and out came the giraffes' heads. Taking one look at the yahoos, the giraffes had the good sense to pull their heads back in, like they'd done with Earl. So the pipsqueak decided to climb up the rig to look in the windows at them. With a leg up from the jumbo yahoo, there he went. The pipsqueak kept climbing while the other yahoos kept sniggering. Then everything went bad. Real bad. The giraffes began stomping and snorting and shaking the rig so much the pipsqueak fell off and then got right back on. That's when I saw what the pipsqueak saw and what the giraffes already knew. The top was still open. The pipsqueak was headed straight for it. Still hearing Pa's voice in my head on top of survival lessons from the road, I stood there in the dark, clenching and unclenching my fists. I was a rowdy of the sneaky coyote variety. Even when my temper got the best of me, I never did more than punch and run, and never more than one guy at a time. As the pipsqueak climbed, he whopped the rig again. With that, the giraffes shoved their heads out their windows to stare my way with eyes terrified and pleading. Then the pipsqueak hit the top. What happened next all but defeats my poor powers to relate. Having nowhere to go, nothing to kick, and no one to defend them, the giraffes must have thought all was lost. Because from them came a caterwaul so bone-chilling I still despair at its memory. People say giraffes don't make sounds. But I'm here to tell you they do, and this one was a moaning, bellowing, wailing piece of giraffe terror that surely had met the hurricane itself. It was a sound only the lion at their throats must hear. I put my hands over my ears, but it didn't help. The sound was vibrating in my chest, making me feel the giraffe's terror as if it were my own. I couldn't take it a second more. Before I even knew I was doing it, I'd sprinted to the rig, dodged Jumbo, punched overalls, and with a flying leap, grabbed at the pipsqueak's leg. The two on the ground then grabbed my legs and spread them like a wishbone. But as they were about to make a wish, the giraffes rocked the rig and the pipsqueak fell in. Next thing I heard over the giraffe's caterwaul was a lot of giraffe kicking and pipsqueak howling, followed by a sound I'd heard 1,000 times before. The click-clack of a cranking shotgun. There stood the old man in his skivvies, shotgun up. The pipsqueak popped from the top like a bottle rocket, the yahoos scrambled for the cover of the trees, and I dove back behind my boulder just as the shotgun blast echoed through the woods, stunning everything silent, including, to my deep relief, the giraffe terror caterwaul. Hearing the old man reloading, I forced myself to look. The rig was still rocking, the giraffes snuffling and stomping, and the old man had the shotgun stuck halfway up Earl's nose. "Where the hell were you?" the old man yelled. "Right here," Earl sputtered. "You see me." "I smell you too, you sumbitch. You been tippling." Swinging the shotgun under an arm, the old man found Earl's flask. I thought he might smack Earl with it. Instead, he pitched it into the dark. "The only thing I abide less than a liar and a thief is a boozer." Earl got wobbly to his feet. "I ain't drunk. I can hold my liquor. Stack of Bibles." "Sit back down," the old man ordered. Earl sat back down. "If anything happens to the giraffes because of your tippling, I swear to God I'll shoot you full of holes. Then I'll let Mrs. Benchley have a crack at ya," the old man said. "You hear me?" Earl nodded, not moving a muscle except to look longingly after his lost flask. Shotgun under an arm, the old man climbed up the rig's side to coo his giraffe speak until the giraffes calmed all the way down. Closing the top himself, he eased to the ground. "We might as well get going before any more native sons show up," he said to Earl, who still hadn't moved. "Water 'em while I get my pants on and use the phone to call the town cop. That is, if you think you can drive. If not, you better get that way fast or I'll turn you over to the copper quicker and you can say Jack Robinson, buddy boy." With that, shotgun still in hand, he tromped back to the cabin. At the mention of cops, Earl began muttering. He looked scared sober enough now. A shotgun in your face can do that. But he proved he was no such thing. Still grumbling, he got up and looked around for the water bucket. When he couldn't find it, he opened Girl's trapdoor, stuck his nose in, and whop! There went Earl, landing spread eagle on the ground, blood trickling out his snoot and into his ears. The old man came running back, shotgun once again up, and then he saw Earl. Fuming, he stared down at his driver lying there looking mighty dead. He nudged him with his boot. Earl didn't move. So the old man parked his gun against the rig, picked up Girl's water bucket perched in its rightful place by the water jugs, filled it from a nearby water pump, and threw the contents on Earl. And the goober came back to life. Both hands over his mangled nose, Earl staggered to his feet to howl and stomp and cuss all at the same time. "That giraffe tried to kill me!" he bawled, blood seeping through his fingers. "It be broke my nose!" The old man glanced at the open trapdoor. "Well, what the hell was your nose doing in there? Jesus Joseph Mary, what kind of rummy idiot did I hire on?" he said, picking up the shotgun. "Get yourself cleaned up. We got to go." "But I'm seeing double." "No, you're not." The old man leveled his gaze. "You've got to drive this rig. You know full well I can't, and we don't have a minute to lose if we want a chance to get the female there alive. You heard the doc." "But that giraffe wants to kill me," Earl howled. "She's not gonna kill you," the old man groused. "She'd have cracked your skull like a nut if she really wanted to. You've seen what she does to me, and I'm still standing." "No, I quit," moaned Earl. The old man whirled that shotgun up like a six-shooter. "We're on the road, you sodden sumbitch. You're not leaving us in the lurch. Now shut your trap." Earl shut his trap. "Sit your worthless ass back down." Earl sat his worthless ass back down. The old man lowered his gun. "I'll get you coffee and some bandages. You'll be fine or wish you were. You're driving. We've got no choice." Then he stalked off toward the office. Down by the road, a truck's headlights came on. It was the dairy truck, readying to head out. As it roared to life, Earl's head whipped around, and with one hand still over his bloody nose, he headed straight for it. Faster than you'd ever think a kicked, bloodied, half-drunk goober could move, he threw the passenger door wide and hopped in just as it was rolling onto the road headed back the way we came. It happened so fast, I don't think I could have caught him even if I'd wanted to, which I surely did not. From the office came the old man, hands full of coffee and bandages, shotgun parked under an arm. As he got closer, he stared at where Earl was supposed to be, not quite believing he wasn't there. Hearing the dairy truck's passenger door slam as it pulled onto the road, he must have put two and two together. Dropping the coffee and bandages, he ran toward the road, half aiming the shotgun at the disappearing truck. I was sure the next thing I'd hear was another shotgun blast. The old man, though, stopped and stared. Shotgun dangling. It was like the sight of his driver vanishing was registering in inches. When it hit home full, he spit and sputtered at the road as if anger alone could conjure Earl back in front of him again. He began to pace, dirt clods flying, shouting words to turn the black air blue. "Sorry shit-faced sodden sumbitch," being the repeatable of the lot, until he marched back to the rig, sank down on the running board, dropped the shotgun in the dirt, and put his head in his hands. He sat that way for a long time. Then, picking up the gun, he got to his feet, straightened his spine, and headed toward the cabin. Busting with a new idea, I made a beeline for the rig. With Wild Boy and Girl watching, I hopped on the running board and stuck my head in the cab's window to study the rig's gearbox, hard and long. Too long. When I jumped back to the ground, the old man and his raised shotgun were waiting. I threw up my hands. "Don't shoot!" I yelped, which even scared me since it was the first thing I'd said out loud since cussing and kicking cuz. "I'm not with those yahoos. It's me. Remember, from quarantine?" Lowering the shotgun, he squinted at the sight I surely was, standing there in my ragged clothes caked with dried quarantine mud. "What the?" the old man managed. "Are you following us?" He moved that shotgun to his other hand, and I saw why he couldn't drive. The gnarly hand I'd noticed back at the dock was his right hand. His gear hand? So I blurted out my new and mighty idea that was still forming even as it was coming out of my mouth. "I can do it," I blurted. "You can't go all the way by yourself with Wild Boy and Girl." "Who?" "The Giraffes. I can drive you to California." At that, he raised one of his bushy eyebrows so high I thought it'd take flight. "Who the hell asked you? And what the hell makes you think I'd want you?" I nodded toward the road. "Because your driver just left you in a lurch, that's why." Mister, I can flat drive circles around any man alive, hand to God. I don't much sleep, I'm not a yahoo, and I sure don't booze. You can trust me. Trust you? I don't even know you. The old man looked my ragged self up and down, pausing at my rope-tied hand-me-down breeches barely covering the tops of my boots. How old are you? 18, I lied. I can drive anything that moves, and I'm a genius with engines, I am. I suppose you're going to tell me you're a genius with giraffes too? The old man said. I stuck out my chin. Better than your driver. What makes you think that? I eased my hand into my pocket. For starters, I know not to poke my nose near an animal's hooves. I lied again, having done exactly that fetching Cousin's rabbit's foot, which at that moment I was rubbing bald. The old man looked past me. How did you get here? Motorcycle. I nodded to the cycle in the shadows. He squinted. Is that yours? I cannot abide a thief or a liar. I got it, don't I? I answered, proving myself both. A patrol car pulled up under the office's light pole, and I stepped back into the shadows. The old man noticed. Enough, he growled. Stuffing the gun under his arm again, he marched to my thieves' cycle, reached in, and ripped out a handful of wires, then marched back to the rig. If I see you again, I got a lawman in every town I can hand you over to. I'm guessing you don't want that. And Jesus, Joseph, Mary, were you raised in a barn? Take a bath. There's a river right there. The smell coming off you is stinging my eyes. Climbing behind the wheel, he stashed the gun back on the rack. Then, pulling that beat-up fedora low over his brow, he ground every last gear until he found one that worked, bouncing and jerking the rig and the giraffes onto the road. Slipping to the ground, I stared at the dangling wires on my out-of-gas cycle, clean out of gas myself. Because there wasn't going to be any fixing that motorcycle. Least not by me. I didn't know a thing about engines beyond kickstarting the occasional thievable cycle. I would have told the old man I could raise the dead if I thought it would have.
To keep listening to this audiobook, I've left you a link in the description so you can do it, at no cost thanks to Audible's 30-day free trial.